This is an important hearing focusing on political prisoners in Hong Kong and how the rule of law has eroded substantially in just the past several years, accelerating since the introduction of the National Security Law in June of 2020, a law that was introduced not by Hong Kong's legislature, but imposed by the National People's Congress Standing Committee in Beijing. That fact tells you how false the one country, two systems mantra has turned out to be. For we no longer have the rule of law in Hong Kong, but the rule by law, and I would say by unjust law, by laws that are imposed upon the people of Hong Kong by their communist overlords in Beijing. Of course, as our witness Kevin Yam points out in his written testimony, we still see lawyers and judges, quote, who decked out in their British-style wigs and gowns, close quote, but the common law inheritance, which was referenced in Article 8 of the governing basic law of Hong Kong, has been destroyed, notwithstanding the residual pomp and ceremony. It is all just Gilbert and Sullivan-esque play acting, the model of modern Major General having been replaced by the Lord High Executioner. For now, the outcome of trials for violation of the national security law are a foregone conclusion, with the Secretary for Security, Chris Tang, boasting just last month of a 100% conviction rate in cases concerning the national security. And what are these violations of the national security law? Consider the case of Hong Kong University student Liu Xingyu, who pled guilty to a charge of incitement to secession for running an instant messaging channel that advocated Hong Kong independence. He was sentenced by the district court judge Amanda Woodcock to 5.5 years in prison for the violation of the NSL, saying that this was a serious nature. To add insult to injury, Liu pled guilty to benefit from the common law practice of reducing a sentence by 1/3 if the defendant pleads guilty. While the judge initially sought to comply with that precedent, the prosecution objected, and the judge only shaved 6 months off the sentence. In other words, a 5-year prison sentence for a university student engaging in free speech. Amanda Woodcock was also the trial judge who sentenced Jimmy Lai, whose son, Sebastian, we shall hear from today, and we're just honored to have you here, for inciting others, she said, to knowingly participate in a banned Tiananmen Square anniversary vigil. This, of course, is separate from the 5-year, 9-month lawfare sentence he was already serving, which Sebastian can tell us more about in a few moments, or his upcoming trial for sedition under the national security law. There should be consequences for judges like Amanda Woodcock, who are complicit in the dismantling of the rule of law in Hong Kong and who bow to the dictates of the Chinese Communist Party. In tandem with this hearing, our staff has produced an excellent report on the role played by Hong Kong judges in rights violations under the national security law, which I encourage everyone to read. Just as we have sanctioned so-called judges in Venezuela and Iran for their undermining of constitutional government and participating in show trials, so too should someone like Amanda Woodcock, who is a judge in name only, be sanctioned for undermining the rule of law and indeed the judiciary. Another judge who should be sanctioned, in my opinion, is District Court Judge Kwok Wai-kin. Judge Kwok was the judge who sentenced 5 speech therapists to 19 months in prison for publishing 3 allegorical children's books about sheep being harmed by wolves, and that was with seditious intent. This is shocking. There is actually one item in the judge's sentence that I actually agree with. However, when the defendants sought to argue that one country, two systems meant that a distinction exists between the People's Republic of China and Hong Kong, Judge Kwok berated them, saying, morally wrong to say that Hong Kong and PRC are separate. In this, Judge Kwok was correct. The distinction between the PRC and Hong Kong has been obliterated. This is the reason why I've introduced in the House, along with Ranking Member McGovern and Senator Rubio and Senator Merkley, our co-chair of this commission, and the 2 ranking members as well, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office Certification Act, or H.R. 1103. I see no reason why the Chinese Communist Party and Communist China should have 3 additional consular outposts in the United States as Hong Kong no longer is distinct from the mainland. Indeed, as our witness Anna Kwok will testify, these economic and trade offices are collecting information about members of her group, the Hong Kong Democracy Council, and other democracy activists. Thus, I call on my colleagues to join as co-sponsors of 1103, and I ask that a letter from the various Hong Kong NGOs calling for markup and passage of H.R. 1103 be entered to the record at this point. And without objection, so ordered. Finally, I would note that American businesses have now been put on notice that the rule of law in Hong Kong is dead. Just as mainland China has political prisoners such as Guo Fei-xiong, who incidentally is facing a sham trial for subversion of state power, Ding Zhixi, and Gao Zhizhang, and I've chaired 3 hearings, one with Gao's daughter, Grace, and 2 with his wife. The way that man has been maltreated as a defense attorney is an abomination to all things good and honorable, and brings dishonor to the Chinese Communist Party, as so many of their actions do. But that one is in particular especially egregious. And of course, we are speaking out as strongly and as consistently in a totally bipartisan way for heroic political prisoners like Jimmy Lai, Gwyneth Ho, and Cho Hang-tung. And if you think the businesses in China are not on the next target, just look across the border and see what happened 2 weeks ago to Bain & Company, whose offices were raided by Chinese authorities in Shanghai. We, too, are going to look closely at the actions of the American companies like PayPal and Stripe, which, as one of our witnesses will testify, are terminating services to pro-democracy groups in Hong Kong. We want to ask them why. And we are also going to look at the role played by TikTok in interfering with the advertising and playing of the documentary, The Hong Konger, Jimmy Lai's Extraordinary Struggle for Freedom. This episode was detailed in a written statement submitted by Father Robert Sirico of the Acton Institute, a man I've known for about 30 years, who was also a great leader for human rights. And I asked it to be entered into the record, along with the submission by Sunny Chung, one of the members of the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation, and also one of the lawyers for Jimmy Lai. So I want to thank my colleagues for being here, and I want to thank especially our witnesses.